And so I want to talk a little bit about some real-world examples of what we're working on. So this fancy marketing picture behind me here is from a bit of work we're doing in London with eFlex to think about how we're looking at sustainability. And so from a sustainability perspective, clearly electrification of the fleet is the single most important thing for the automakers and probably for the world from a sustainability for quite some time to come. But there's some really significant challenges that putting out and replacing tens of millions of vehicles on the road with electric is going to cause. Right? We're going to need tens of millions more charging stations, and we're going to need a power grid that can support that. And so one of the things that we're working on is vehicle-to-grid technologies. Right, so imagine the use case where Mark gets up in the morning, drives his car to work, runs some errands, comes home, and he's got 60% left in his vehicle charge. If you plug it into the wall and it's a dumb device, now at the peak usage, he's pulling power off the grid to get the car back to 100%. But with some smarts into the vehicle, we can actually say, all right, well, you're leaving for work tomorrow at 7, so I'm actually going to use your car to feed your house and feed the grid until peak hours end, and then switch to now charging the vehicle. And there's a number of use cases similar to that, like vehicle-to-vehicle charging as well, where we're able to, in fleet locations, transfer power from one vehicle to another during peak times to ensure that we are putting the least load on the infrastructure as possible. But near and dear to my heart, I think one of the things that we have the biggest opportunity to make a huge difference in is safety. Right, 1.3 million people a year die in traffic accidents. 500,000 of those are pedestrians, and 90+% of them are caused by human error. So those are fully preventable with software and technology. So what you're seeing behind me here is a POC we're running in the City of London, leveraging sensors, smart routers, cameras to do object detection and AI, and using vehicle-to-infrastructure type solutions, we're able to detect road hazards, pedestrians, emergency vehicles, and push that immediately into the vehicle through our WebEx platform to alert the driver that there's a hazard they need to take action with. And as you see this continue with autonomous vehicles, now the infrastructure and the vehicle can work together to prevent these things. And that's nearly 1 million lives that we can save every year, and that's a really significant number. In fact, we're actually doing it here in Las Vegas. We're using very similar technology to do pedestrian monitoring, to alert through some of our platforms, that if a pedestrian steps off the curb or into the crosswalk at red, it will send an alert back to the vehicle that there is a hazard ahead. Those types of safety innovations are absolutely spectacular for society. And those are only be done leveraging connectivity, and really a different version of connectivity. This is the type of low latency solutions that are going to be really required to deliver on this. But a little bit of fun, and actually we're having a great conversation about how do we all go back to work, is the vehicles actually become a real office. Right? The Ford F-150 is one of the most popular offices in the world right now. And what we're doing with WebEx in the vehicle is basically being able to embed some of those enterprise technologies directly into the software of the vehicle, and through Zero Trust, secure that connection so that this vehicle is now actually a part of your corporate network. Right? And that, along with thousands of other examples of how we change the experience, has the opportunity to drive real change. And a fun little example, please ignore this horrible picture of me, but this is one of my engineers at a meeting recently where he was trying to make it to his kid's basketball game. Right? In the old world, he would have been stuck at the office until 8 o'clock at night, waiting for this meeting, and would have missed the whole thing. But here, he was able to jump out at halftime into his car, with the heated seats on, of course, and because it is Denver, and join a WebEx from his vehicle using cellular connectivity and our mobile IoT platform end-to-end to provide these types of use cases. And this is just this is a use case from today. Just think where we'll be able to take this in 2, 3, 5 years from now. But then the question is, all right, that's great, cool, but most of us are not automakers. We're network guys, right? So how do we make this happen? Like, what is required to build this infrastructure? And right, so we see a couple of really big trends that are critical in how we deliver this type of a network, right? So the first one really is distributed cores, right? So this is one that it's a really significant change for how we've deployed in the past. Now we're deploying hundreds of cores in multiple locations versus large data centers with large cores, and it creates a really significant challenge, right? The cores of old in the LTE world tended to be very, very big iron boxes with complex configs, but one complex config. And now we're seeing networks where in the past you might have had 50, 100 of those large iron boxes be replaced with maybe 200 data centers that run thousands of servers and hundreds of thousands or even millions of cloud native containers. So as an industry, we have to adapt to the fact that we need to think differently about how we deploy, how we operate, and how we manage and upgrade the infrastructure. Right? It's now a DevOps CI/CD world with cloud. It is now an opportunity where we're going to need a lot of SRE type skill sets in the network versus the I'm not supposed to say CCIE because I work for Cisco, but we still need them, they're important. So it does create lots of challenges and changes for how we all operate these networks. Similarly, we're seeing a lot in the eSIM world, which is really some interesting use cases, right? We're working with some of the auto manufacturers. Now they want to have the SIM in their vehicle in the factory on their private 5G network. And they're using that to load all the software in the vehicle during manufacturing. And as soon as it rolls off the line, it switches to Telus' network here to provide connectivity while it's in Canada. And as soon as it transits to, maybe it's going to South America where the owner's going to be at the end of the day, it needs to be able to, again, transit to the other network. In the past, you'd have, hundreds of SIMs in every different carrier. You wouldn't be able to test them. It was really a significant challenge. And with eSIM, we solve a lot of those problems. But I think one of the key bits and really significant changes in how we have to think about the understanding of the use cases and how we look at it is in the LTE world, customers had a 1 gig data plan. And wherever it was, they had access to the internet as a dumb pipe, and that was it. That's not good enough anymore for IoT use cases, for connected car use cases. And so we're looking at having much more visibility required by everyone in the value chain. Right? The OEMs are now looking into in great detail what's happening on the network so they can drive the various use cases, which means we've got to be thinking differently about how we expose what's happening in the networks and give them control. And that's really a tough thing to do if you've got many, many customers who all have the ability through API to programmatically change your network at all times. Right? So there's a lot of guardrails and a lot of complexity in how we adapt the software to be there. The other one that I think is really interesting is multi-access flexibility. I live in a rural area where between my grocery store and my house, I have a 30-minute block with no connectivity at all, which is extremely painful if I forgot to download music before I went into the canyon. But what we're looking at now is the vehicle comes out of the gate with LTE, with 5G, with Wi-Fi, satellite backup coming as well. And the OEMs are getting very smart about which connection type and which data goes over those different pipes. Right? Think you've got a 5 gig log file telemetry that needs to come up into the cloud. Right? You don't want to use that over high-speed 5G, leveraging your QoS slice at the edge. That's costing a fortune. You want to wait until that vehicle goes and gets plugged in at the charging station and leverage the fact that in all those charging stations we just built, we have public Wi-Fi access. And now that Wi-Fi uploads all of that data. But when you need that really critical alert coming in from the roadways that the pedestrians come in, you damn well want that high QoS, low latency 5G connection that we've spent so much money to deploy and build. So those types of use cases are really, really challenging. And then when we get to satellite, which is in its infancy, it's going to be super expensive, you want to make sure the only things you offload to the satellite are the really important things, like my Spotify. All right, so at the end of the day, this all comes together into a next-gen network powered by the intelligent distributed edge that's application-driven and service-based QoS, which is really important as we look at that, talking about multi-access. You add that together with the enterprises now having programmatic access to the network and visibility and giving them that control. all that adds up to us being able to provide together a revolutionary experience for our customers. And viewing that automobile as a digital platform will allow us to drive environmental integration and really deliver a safer, sustainable future in automotive, which also has the wonderful benefit of really delivering a spectacular user experience. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you on that. So one last thing is I look forward to what my personal digital experience is going to be. I'm a GM guy still, right? You heard me, you saw my Camaro at the beginning. My next car is that new GM, right? And here's the thing. In the past many years since the safety system of me with keys went into practice, I can tell you that the thing that excites me about this vehicle is 0 to 60 in 3 seconds for a 10,000 pound vehicle. So now GM has understood the flaw in their previous design and has really done some great work to upgrade to keep me from doing anything incredibly stupid. So now that shameless plug for GM aside, if there's anyone in the audience who may be able to get me up the reservation list, I just really appreciate it. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. We've got a phenomenal panel. I'm going to turn it back to you, Barbara, to bring that panel up and continue the discussion.
First of all, thank you very much, Mark. So it's been a wonderful introduction, I would say, because then we are going to the next session. And as I mentioned here, we're going to have a completely different stakeholders on the panel. And I'm sure we were going to cover some of the topics that has been already mentioned. So, or we're going to also increase the number of topics. But with this one, I just want to introduce first our moderator, Mark Thurman from IBM. So he's going to do a wonderful job to actually entertain you all the time. So please, the panelists over on the stage.
Matt did a great job. I just want to thank him again. And I think he brought us some very good topics. So I'm going to sit down here, but my name's Mark Thurman. I work at IBM. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, who they are, kind of a one-liner of what they do, and then we'll kind of get into topics. So I don't know if there's a handheld mic. We didn't tell the AV guys that. So just in case, if there's some questions that you guys think you might want to ask, and some people like to stay quiet, some people like, Barbara has a handheld. So if there's a question that you have a burning need to ask in front of everybody here, in front of all of your industry peers, please let us know. Barbara will come around and hand you the thing and I'll try and translate it, but don't feel any pressure. We've got all of your names. All the name tags have like a little RFID chip, so we know who you all are. But anyway, I want to introduce my panel. I want to have them introduce themselves and then tell them, and then we'll kind of get into our conversation. But again, it's going to be name, quick elevator pitch on what they do and what their company is.
Okay. I'm the CEO of Expedited Wireless. So we are a platform that's sold as a service that enables the very enterprise-first connectivity that was just spoken about by Mr. Berlinetta.
Hi everybody, my name is Jason Putnam. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Mullen Automotive. Mullen Automotive is an EV startup. We debuted our first car last November, the Mullen 5. So my main focus for the company is building our brand, our awareness, and I also wear the hat for customer voice and customer experience.
Samer. Everybody knows Samer.
Almost. So Samer Gaesa, I head technology strategy and architecture at TELUS. And for those who are not familiar, TELUS is a telco operator in Canada. We're about 12 million subscribers, and we offer fixed, mobile, and connected car services to our customers.
My name is Angela Priest. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy at Wejo. Wejo is a software company that ingests connected vehicle data, secures it, and then processes it for use in various verticals such as insurance, traffic and transportation, among others.
Perfect. So welcome to my panel. We just heard a great presentation from our friend at Cisco, who was inadvertently funnier than I thought he would be. So I want to congratulate. We were sitting here chuckling because you're actually quite funny. So that's a great thing. But so let's start with the data and let's start with connectivity. Samer, just 5 years ago, what was the average data plan in a vehicle? How much data was coming in and going out?
way less than now, but we've been providing connectivity to connected cars in Canada and IoT in general for quite some time. And what we're noticing now that car manufacturers are actually focusing on multiple aspects within the car. So it's not only about updating your maps, it's not only about the status of the car or firmware notifications, but the in-car entertainment, Spotify, the streaming of services, and very recently, a lot of more application ecosystems are starting to show up. The consumption we've measured, at least in one car manufacturer, is on an average about 12 gigabytes per month. That's a lot of traffic. And of course, in 4G domain, that's just one pipe. We were saying earlier, it's just one pipe, doesn't really differentiate much between the types of traffic on there, it's not prioritized. It is, of course, by design, very resilient, private, and secure, but it's a mix of that. And that's a big challenge for the car manufacturers to sort out, but also a big challenge for us to ensure, as we were saying, if we have 1.5 million vehicles that need to get a crucial software update, how is that going to be done in the most optimum way for the vehicle and for the drivers?
No, I think it makes good sense. And one thing, when I've met with a few auto OEMs, a few American auto OEMs, they've talked about how they're paying for the data initially in some form or another. There's an initial period on my car that it was free, and then I'm paying $10 a month or whatever it is. But one thing that I learned is that there's a lot of data that kind of quote unquote leaks out that they're paying for, but they don't know where it goes. So I don't know if any of you guys want to kind of jump in on that point. Where does that data go? This is almost a gift.
I know, you're handing it over to me,
yes.
And I'm going, ooh, I'm going to try and make sure people's eyes don't glaze over when I
but
say that.
Specifically, it was a ton of data that this automaker they had no idea where it was going. They had no control over it. So there's your gift.
Thank you. That was a nice intro. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use the data that come off cars, and quite frankly, OEMs don't even know all the ways that this data can be used to come off cars. And I think there's some challenges around it that make it that way, because what you have is you have subsets of people within the automakers that know those components of the data and how they want to use it. But what we see is that when you put all of that data together, it creates for some really, really interesting, powerful information in terms of how do you improve sustainability. So if you know that 30% of congestion in cities is caused by people looking for parking, okay? Just as one example. So if I understand how to route people intelligently to parking based on not only what's available in the infrastructure, but also based on kind of the routes that people take through their behaviors and their habits, so kind of those journeys, that journey intelligence, then I can start to improve kind of sustainability in very, very meaningful ways. So when you think about what that means, if I can get cars off roads, I've reduced emissions and I've also reduced wear and tear on the roads, which can save hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure development. So that's kind of one particular use case. There are other ones that, just as a consumer, I don't want to spend time sitting in my car needlessly. And so if you can understand things like intersection performance, what are the turn ratios at intersections and things like that, that's data that can come directly from your car. But today, largely departments of transit and municipalities, they're using things like road ropes, the strips on the road that you drive over, and that's point-in-time data, it's not real-time data. The mapping companies are relying on user-generated data a lot of the time, which is not that accurate, and it can be fooled, for lack of a better way to say. But when somebody's in a vehicle with the sensors in the vehicle firing and producing all of that data, they're in a vehicle. There's no question what they're doing in that vehicle.
Yeah, right.
So there's a lot of power in just our day-to-day that data offers.
So when all this stuff comes into the vehicle, I think this is probably your guys' expertise. We're talking about vehicles becoming a rolling data center, being secure, having its own, being its own entity. How do you guys view that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think at least for us, a better term I think for the vehicle is not a rolling data center, but it's a rolling edge, right?
Rolling edge.
And when we start to think about data and systems, I think it's really important that we separate kind of mission critical connected car, versus IVI or infotainment, right? Because one part of it is I have a mom of 4 going down the freeway at 60 miles an hour, and I got to be pretty serious about how I do my software updates, right?
Right.
I have 230, 250 subsystems on the car, all that are miniature IT transactions, right? All where I need end-to-end visibility, end-to-end control. And I can't underestimate the importance, back to the point that Matt made about giving that OEM the control, the visibility, their IP addresses, their security, all those things to basically execute their mission. And then on the other side, on the IVI side, which is really interesting too, it's a lot of data, but most automotive OEMs are going, hey, listen, the average fine in the EU, right, for data compliance issues this year is 7 million euros, the average, okay? So with all this data, it's like, listen, they're going, hey, listen, I want nothing to do with that. So that's going to be...
Let me interrupt and be clear on that. So you're talking about, like in Germany, there's certain laws about what data can come in, just using Germany as the example.
Germany, Turkey, UAE, right? I mean, they're taking data sovereignty and compliance and they're turning it into a very serious and frankly, a revenue center, right? Well, so how do I, as an auto manufacturer, kind of really separate, right? We've got a TCU on the car. We've got, really it's a separate APN now, right? And I'm like pushing that over here,
right.
And that consumer data, I really don't want anything to do with that, and I'm going to focus here, but I also have to give that driver experience, all those applications, right?
And Jason, you guys are building vehicles.
Yeah, it's really interesting for a company like us because we have a clean slate. We don't have legacy systems that we're working with that need to communicate with each other and bridge software that you have to put in the cars to make those systems work together and communicate. So, much like the wiring in the vehicles, we're trying to take the cleanest approach. And that also goes into the software, the code base that's in the software. So really the opportunity is for us to lose because it's a clean slate and it's an open book. The execution point is really how it interacts with the customer. Is it seamless? Is it silent? Because that's one of the things that we're looking at is the connectivity has to be fast and it has to be silent. So what I mean by that is right now we're not even going to show the customer that the car is connected, what it's connected to. We're going to do all of that behind the scenes. So how can we make things as intuitive and proactive as possible for the customer? And that's our approach.
It's kind of nice to not start with a legacy environment.
Exactly.
It's like what we were talking about privately before about smart cities in certain parts of the world where if you have no governmental constraints and a clean sheet of paper and endless money, you can kind of do anything you want. I'm not saying that Mullen has endless money, but...
Building cars are expensive. So
it makes perfect sense. So I think our friend Matt pointed out when we were I'm sorry to highlight you on the sidelines, but he was talking about sort of the usage of eSIM. So I'm going to ask Samer a bit. So how do you guys view eSIM? How do you incorporate that? And you're sitting on top of this other country that you're in. So how do you deal with that and the connectivity issues where vehicles are coming in? Hopefully, when borders are even more open, driving through and all that. Truckers going from, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you view eSIM? It's a short version.
Well, there has been an evolution of the needs of the connected vehicles and vehicle manufacturers. So knowing that it takes probably 2.5 years from the moment they say, you know what, this modem, this device is now ready from a testing point of view, let's put it back in production. That cycle, correct me if I'm wrong, is like at least 2 years. Mm-hmm. And such, I've worked with airplane manufacturers in the past, and it's the same. You want to add a little router on the plane to do video on demand? That's a couple of years to get approvals and testing and safety. So having said that, a lot of the car manufacturers are actually moving to eSIM for extremely pragmatic reasons. In the past, it's one pipe, everything goes through it, it didn't really matter. and utilization, as we mentioned, grew over time to gigs per month, but it started out very, very little. Like you basically only needed, to have a call, to make a call in case of emergency, or get some SMS-based telematics or very little data. But with the eSIM, you can actually, like we do with some of our partners, we send them our eSIM profile, they get manufactured. When the cars ship over, the connectivity management platforms that our partners at Cisco have built, they're able to actually detect where you're at, find the deal that fits best, and then through that we load our profile on top, and that eSIM profile can be shipped globally. So you actually can send, and we've done deals. I mean, obviously in the connected car space, one of our biggest customers is GM, and that's one of our projects we're executing right now. We have other connected vehicle partners. In TELUS, I think we've seen that the evolution towards eSIM is not just now adopted by the car manufacturers, but also we're seeing connected scooters, connected bicycles. We have customers who have those services across the world, and they elect to choose the eSIM connectivity as the first part. So now we have the eSIM, now we have connectivity. Then the next bit is, where are your applications? Are they close to the edge? Of course, the car is a moving edge, as we talked, right. But where's the closest edge where it's actually going to get connectivity? That needs to be close to the core network. It can't be very far from it to get the best latency. And I mean, everybody knows responsiveness or latency of networks. We're actually very proud of our network performance as it is, but we're actually improving that by lowering the latency in what we call the latency roadmap over the next few years. And we're going to hit the 5 milliseconds. People ask me, what do you need 5 milliseconds for? That's, I don't know, 200th of a blink of an eye. But the reality is the applications to make decisions to save lives are going to be crucial. We talked about some of the work we did with the 5G AA, for example. Up here in the States, we actually shipped over an eSIM profile. We put it into a Jeep Wrangler that was connected. It went on the road, an obstructed pedestrian moving outside behind a truck is only seen by infrastructure camera that controls the traffic lights, but then that sends an alert and it saves lives. So two things I want to end with. I think eSIM is now. If you don't have a global connectivity partner, we also have that at TELUS. So we have a global connectivity platform. So we're happy to talk to you. But we also preach that you really need to think of how you evolve into 5G, because that one pipe is no longer sufficient. You can't mix everything into one. So you start to have the concept of 5G slicing, and that will actually give you the ability to have different data rates for different types of profiles or different types of data that you're going to carry. And of course, coupled with edge computing, you get that low latency that will make your car safer, and you start to monetize the value-added services on top.
That's perfect. So with respect to your guys' business, do you care about eSIM? Is that sort of too far down on the stack?
So we love eSIM, right?
Okay.
I mean, no more plastic, software driven, right? I mean, it's great. But I just want to, pivot off of what you said. Like, we have these radios that are getting really fast. But back to what Matt said about the distributed nature of these networks. We can put in these networks that are super fast, right? But if that data is tromboning from Vancouver to Toronto and back to the car, based on this kind of hub and spoke, environment, that's something's got to change as well, because, it's not about treating a car in Rio de Janeiro as we, had treated the same in Anaheim. It's a local environment, it's smart city, it's distributed connectivity, distributed data, distributed connected car platforms.
Correct.
Right, that are all coming together, that are aware of local conditions, right? Back to the vehicle to grid thing, right? What if, the wind didn't blow the night before as we move to renewable generation? It's like, I need those cars to come in and plug into my commercial building, right? To literally keep the lights on, right? So I can generate some power. There's so many things as we move to this wonderful and exciting times of smart cities and interconnected, man, but it has got to be distributed. It's got to be local, and we have to enable all the ecosystem players with visibility and control. Because without that, there's just too many inconsistencies, I think.
Right.
How do we incorporate PII, privacy?
Oh, I can.
Oh, another gift to you.
Oh, you just sent that right my way.
I didn't even look at the paper.
I know.
Came
I
right
know.
off my.
I'm helping you out here. I'm
Yes.
helping you out. I think, Michael, you raised the interesting point of all of the privacy regulations that are going through, and you had asked me originally, kind of, how do I know where my data is going?
Right.
And so one of the really important things that's happening in the space is how do you secure? Not only how do you secure the data if you're an automaker, but how do you ensure the privacy of the user? And also, how do you obtain consent from the user? And because you have a patchwork of different regulations, so you've got various regulations like the GDPR in the EU, you've got the CCPA in California, you've got various other states starting to pick up on those regulations, and they're all kind of developing their own flavor for it. That becomes very quickly, there's a lot of complexity in how you manage that, and whether you do kind of on-premise solutions versus solutions that can apply those privacy treatments in the car and at the edge, where latency becomes really important. Because to the example that you gave, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be shooting a signal to the car and trying to get consent at the moment of impact. You know, you want to make sure that you have that right consent, but also that you have the trust of the driver to say, hey, we're going to treat your data well, and we're also going to protect your data, and we're going to use it for ethical use. That's incredibly important to getting access to that data. You have to build that trust with the driver. And to do that, they have to understand how their data is being used, why it's being used, and that it's ultimately being used for a good purpose.
No, I think it's a good point, and I don't want to pull Nicola into this necessarily, but in the EU, isn't there a PII regulation around, you know, you may not know, so I'm putting you on the spot, but zero consent, you know, as the default.
That's opt-in.
Yeah, so you have to opt in, not opt out. Sorry.
Opt in, not opt out.
Just wanted to make sure you're awake.
I've got you. Don't worry.
But I think that, you know, in as much as, you know, there's going to be a company that comes up that can do, like, you know, consent with, you know, zero latency, right?
Yeah.
I think the reality is that coming back to the distributed nature of things is that the automotive OEM is going to need to, on as local of a basis as possible, basically, you know, if it's in, you know, Holland, data originates in Holland, it stays in Holland. You know, they strip out the data so it's not associated with the driver and the VIN, and they get what they need basically to fulfill their mission, right? And I think that that's critically important. And we have to enable that distributed environment, you know, with basically end-to-end visibility, and really connectivity almost becomes an object, right, in a workflow, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think everyone so far has thought of connectivity in a connected vehicle environment as, okay, A versus B versus C, you get the same. That's not the case when you're talking about advanced 4G, advanced 5G use cases. And what the connected vehicle ecosystem demands for telemetry is extremely different from that of entertainment, and extremely different from that of avoiding accidents because you're subscribed to a cellular V2X use case. So the fact that they're all different, but you still have one SIM card, and then you ask the question, where are the apps? Where is the app ecosystem? Where can I put my edge compute applications so that they're nearest and they get you the most resilient or the most responsive reaction to your command? I think that's the equation. Now, on top of all of that, there needs to be an open API ecosystem that allows developers to actually easily develop applications. But that's going to be the flavor of every car manufacturer. Everyone will depend on, you know, use their own sort of preferred API. But, you know, and that, again, to your point, the complexity and the data that comes, all of that, each manufacturer will have their own. What we believe that what's going to be useful for the end users is that all of that data, once it is secure by design, resilient by design, the whole connectivity needs to be that way, and it gives identity protection by design. What the end result is going to be an ecosystem where you're able to actually monetize it and provide an experience to the end user that is safe. You know, as we talked about, it doesn't depend on the user themselves as much as what the car is actually able to do.
Yeah, no, I think the other part, now Samer is throwing me.
I'm just
He's
giving you another
throwing
one.
me softballs.
And just so you know, since we asked for people to be included,
Yes, we
I
asked.
want to make sure we include, we have two different
Okay.
questions from the audience. We'll come back to you, I promise, because I've been giving you gifts all day.
It's okay.
So-
It's okay.
Hello? Okay, great. Hi. So, heard about the opt-in, but are we hearing about opt-out? Because there's a lot of people who maybe wouldn't want to share that data. And at the same time, also thinking about fleet management, right? Large fleets, maybe they would want the opportunity to monetize their own data rather than somebody else. And then finally, security as part of that. Thinking about, people potentially hacking your vehicle, or, should the police have the ability to remotely stop your vehicle? Things of that. Are these being considered in policy? Thank you.
So I want to try and make sure that we've got the question before you give up the mic, just in case. So I'll take the last one first, because I think you had kind of a layered set of questions. Should the police be able to stop your car or figure out where your car's been?
Great.
You're building a car. Let's start with you.
Well, I think, in some cases they're able to access some of that data now. So if a car is stolen, I know through GM, through OnStar, they can track a vehicle. So, yeah, I think in those cases, again, I think all of that should be something the customer signs off on. And that's the challenge in a lot of this is, from my point of view, Rome was built in a day, right? So the challenge is how we execute it with the customer. So how do we give them this consent on these data streams? How do we make it easy for them to digest it and understand it in a really easy format? So I think things like that, we would allow the customer to opt into it up front with a scenario.
Want to take a bite of this one?
No.
No. Okay, good.
I think it depends on regulation and where the regulatory bodies
Right.
will allow. I mean, the GSM Association caters for a lot of the local regulations for many of those things. So as those regulations become clear, what
Right.
we can and cannot do, then the technology will deliver whatever that is. I think at the end, the users always have a choice, right? The customer has a choice. I want to comment on one thing you mentioned, though, the fleet capabilities. So we're very active in the 5GA as well, and we're seeing a lot of cellular V2X use cases on fleet. The data, I would say, is on the vehicle as you're moving. The data consumption, if this is a vehicle within a fleet of 4 trucks, for example, and they're sort of platooning each other, following each other for many reasons, aerodynamic, etc. There's so much inter-data communication that's being consumed inside the vehicle itself, keeping the distance, monitoring, receiving from this infrastructure, from pedestrians, from other vehicles. All of that data is for real-time decision making. A lot of it gets analyzed by the car manufacturers as to ensure that they teach their machine learning algorithms better ways in avoiding things, potholes, etc. But largely it's inside the vehicle. That data, if it gets transported back, like a video feed from one of the cameras, and now cars have a ton of cameras all over, it is actually a significant amount of video that needs to be carried. Most networks are not designed for this type of video upload. So people say, all these cameras, people are going to monitor me. And believe me, no one wants to see it was in your car. It costs a lot of money to do so. But I said, is that technically possible? Everything is possible. The reality is, what's the regulation and what do you sign off? I followed this TikToker, and it's very funny because he actually reads all the disclaimers, everything you sign off on. You should Google him and find him, because you look at what you sign off when you ride a Tesla. You're only giving your life away. Well, I'm just kidding. But that's where the proof is in there, right? You're giving away agreement. You're saying, here's my right. You can take that and use that to improve the service.
You'll be.
Can I just offer one perspective on fleet that maybe is a whole different vector here? And you think about interested parties, right? So you take Amazon in a city. They're going to have a bunch of electric vehicles, right? Okay, well, I want to sell my data, but then and then the electric utility. When you think about it, when they put an EV station that's going to do a fast charge, it's storage, it's an inverter. They're building a feeder line, right? This is heavy capital that they want used, so they want to get it in the right place. Then you come back to the other examples like Amazon's, well, hey, listen, if we can actually start to arbitrate energy every day, maybe we bring our net fuel cost down by a certain percentage points. You got the utility that wants it, you got the fleet, the fleet guy that wants it, and you sure as heck you got the restaurant owners and everybody that want to have the lunch stops, right? So it's going to be an interesting monetization angle here because everybody's kind of interested in both directions. So,
Right.
Cool.
And I think one thing on
One
the fleet
little,
aspect.
one little thing.
Just one little thing.
Not
on the
making a
fleet.
little joke, just one little thing.
Ah, you got me. You worked it in. So I knew you were going to do it. I was expecting it.
never told me
Even
that.
I wore my
smooth.
big
That was-
shoes.
that was
I wore my
expected.
big shoes. So, so when you talk about fleet and fleets wanting to monetize their data, the actual bigger value for fleets is actually the uptime on the road. So it's not about monetizing their data, it's about how can they use their data to maximize the uptime of the vehicle. So how can I understand, for example, if you think about things like remote diagnostics, you could take a lot of the sensors in the vehicle and understand that there might be something going wrong with it. And they're interested in things like predictive maintenance. Can I predict when a vehicle is about to go down so I can tell my driver, instead of dropping it off at the storage yard, can you take it over to the mechanic shop and get it fixed because there's something going wrong with it? So they're really looking at it more from that perspective than, hey, how do I just go out and sell this? And so when you think about monetizing data, that's like a really scary word for a lot of people because you think, they're just going out and they're selling all my data, all of these places. And the reality is that it's actually being aggregated. It's not about that one data point. It's being aggregated and used. And it's really being used to understand how to reduce cost. Like it's how to reduce costs. How do we give a better experience? Like it's not the kind of salacious type things that you generally think it's being used for. And as far as your question about opt-in versus opt-out, some of the more stringent legislations that are coming in, it's actually not about opting out. Opt-out is a default. You have to opt in, and you can remove that opt-in at any time. So there's some protections going in place that are specifically for that, and I think it's around access to get data because people won't give you access if they don't have control of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because we're coming down to about 5 minutes. Her in the back. There's two, and then you're going to be like fourth. I'm going to try and get everybody in. Okay, quick hits.
Hi.
Hi.
What a wonderful panel. I wanted to congratulate Merlin for its new partnership with WaterGen. I would love to learn more about your vision and
Is that
how
your
do
PR
you see...
person?
He put
No, I
I
promise.
didn't know we could put plants in the audience.
Well, that's okay. Okay.
Disclaimer, I'm from WaterGen. But I wasn't supposed to be here. But it happened to be so I'm very happy to see Jason on this panel.
Yeah, thank you.
But I would love to, you're talking about monetizing data and sustainability and other solutions. How do you see solutions like WaterGen, which is a technology that creates water out of air, integrate as part of your broader vision?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you see it panned out down the road?
Right, yeah.
Quick
Just
answer.
as a quick answer, we can take it offline. I think the biggest opportunity really is in the fleet, the EV fleet space, where we can monetize and utilize that. And then also, you look at water from air at charging points. So where you stop to charge, there could be an opportunity there as well. And that's so you look at the fleet, you look at recreational, and then you look at charging points is where the big opportunity for that is.
Okay.
Just avoid the speaker.
Yeah, sorry.
Now we hear you.
Just you mentioned eSIM, and actually, like GSMA forum and 3GPP spend a lot of time to advertise SIM mechanism itself, like a good point of identification and security for also other connectivities, regardless the mobility itself. Yeah. So, do you think the eSIM SIM mechanism itself will be like a main source of the identification for the connected devices for the future?
We sure hope so. I think the level of encryption in the current standards for eSIM are proving sufficient for some of those initial use cases. But as you know, with any product, there's always an evolution. But the good thing is we're not depending on that alone. There's, again, we have a practice every time we touch a project, we say secure by design, and we go through a complete audit of empathy. You mentioned something very good with the fleet. You empathize what their goal is. We empathize that this is our own kids riding in a vehicle, and we actually go through and make sure that it's being tested. But aside from that, edge computing, our core, these are telco standards built, 5 nines, 6 nines, unlike a lot of the, I would say, over-the-top sort of applications where there may not be that level of attention. And with telcos, we're a regulated entity. We are governed by the local laws, and we have to comply to all of them. But we ever extend that as well to ensure that we had whatever security firewalls, and we just announced recently, actually yesterday, partnership with Palo Alto on that also with the network. So from a security point of view, I think it is one of the most important pillars we at work. We take the guidelines, the basic guidelines as the absolute minimum, and then we add on top our best practices and what we learn from with our customers.
Okay, 30 seconds for this gentleman, question and answer, 30 seconds for you, and then we'll wrap up and move to the next panel.
All right, I'll try to make it very quick then. So I'll pile on the data-related questions. Surveillance economy, or the data economy, is worth multiple of trillions of dollars. I think it's $2 trillion. So there's a massive value to the data, right? And it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good use cases, as you mentioned. It can be used for very nefarious purposes.
And the
too.
question is?
Question is, OEMs and all others involved, there's a conflict of interest in terms of that data. What do you guys think about a completely neutral party who is a champion of consumer privacy that oversees all of this, independent of all of the players in the middle?
Okay, everybody got the question? Quick hit.
Yeah, I'm neutral on that question.
Okay.
Neutral.
Samer, quick hit.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends.
It depends
You're not
on
neutral.
who your customers are, who access.
I'm not neutral in that
Okay.
question.
Yes.
No. I think it comes down to ethics, and some of it comes down to ethics in business and how you set up your business. So you heard Samer talking about privacy by design and things like that.
Okay.
And so sorry.
I have one quick question
stop
for
there.
him. We're already 8 seconds over. Quick question, quick answer. I can't hear you. Hang on. Have the analyst next to you help you.
It's on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of interesting discussion about ownership of data and
Ownership of data, okay.
Data and about data. But how much do you think is the safety of the roads itself dependent on data, or is more about ownership of the road itself? Towards safer roads is a topic, right? Is data really the root cause of safety?
Yes. We work with a lot of cities because, every province has its own cities and districts.
Short answers.
Short answer is, as fast as we can run, we need the regulation to catch up to allow and enforce these sort of capabilities to make the roads safe. They won't be safe on their own. Potholes need to be covered, and all of that will need to happen as well.
And just
Any other quick
one last
answer?
perspective is, when you become aware of something, don't forget that you're liable for it.
Yeah.
So some people may want to just stay blind to that data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Any other quick answer?
Yeah, quick answer is, if you understand safety conditions going on the road in real time, you can get those safety issues addressed before there's more concerns. Biggest accidents on the road tend not to be the first stoppage on the road, it tends to be the second. That tends to be the big accident. So if I can deploy a tow truck out there to get a vehicle stopped in the road, out of the road in real time, that means I potentially just saved somebody's life. So the data is critically important in that.
Great questions. Thank you very much. Thank you to my panel.